Hello and welcome back to another video. My name is CJ, the Populist New Yorker, and today we're going to be taking a look at a 2022 best case gubernatorial scenario for the Democrats. I'd previously done a best case scenario video for the Republicans. You could find that video in the link down below. I've also done two more videos which are Senate predictions, basically, best case scenario for either side. So there's some changes from those videos and my normal prediction. Colorado and New Mexico have been moved to the safe category in a best case scenario. I don't think Polis or Lujan Grisham will have any problem running for re-election, even in the conventional scenario, but certainly in a best case, they'll probably win by a safe margin. Likewise with the state of Oregon, in this scenario, Republicans probably nominate more of a Trump-type Republican, and they would fare pretty poorly, I think, against normie Democrat, I guess. So we're going to start off west to east with the state of Nevada. Steve Sisolak is the current incumbent governor in the state of Nevada. He won his last election by about 4 points or so against incumbent Attorney General Adam Laxalt. This was also the same year that Dean Heller was knocked off of the Senate by I think the largest statewide margin, which was +5 for the Democrats, with Jackie Rosen. Something interesting, though, is that Nevada is a state that tends to vote to the right of the nation. It voted to the right of the nation in 2020. It also voted to the right of the nation in 2016 and 2018, which really goes to show you that Nevada is shifting more to the right. It has been since 2008 if you look at the results federally and statewide. But I think certainly in a best case scenario, Democrats are holding on to the state of Nevada, probably by a lean margin, similar to Sisolak's victory in 2018. Nevada is one of those states that's always going to be close, and I think this year would be no exception. Even in a Dem best case scenario, I still think Sisolak would do very well, probably win by around 5 points, 5 or 6, which would be on the higher end of the lean spectrum there. Alaska is interesting because Alaska back in 2018, Mike Dunleavy, again, this was an open seat, beat former Democratic Senator Mark Begich by a margin of 6 points. Also, Bill Walker was running. I don't know if he was actually running, but he was on the ballot as an independent. He was the incumbent governor at the time. He became very unpopular due to some budget decisions that he made, and as a result, his popularity tanked in the state. And with that, his re-election chances. He decided not to run for re-election. Mike Dunleavy decided to run against Mark Begich and did pretty well. He won by 6 points, but that is a likely margin. If we take a look at the 2022 field in the state of Alaska, Al Gross and Mark Begich, which are big Democratic names, might be running for this seat. I don't think it's certainly going to be enough to flip the state of Alaska, but I think it could certainly go into that likely category again in 2022. Now, this is, again, best case scenario for Democrats, though. I don't think they're actually going to be able to pick this seat up, given the nature of the year we're expecting in 2022. Moving on to the state of Arizona. Arizona could certainly be a Democratic pickup. This was a state that was won by Joe Biden by 0.3% in 2018. Incumbent Governor Doug Ducey won by a safe red margin, but he is not able to run, and his popularity has slipped both due to the COVID pandemic and the fallout from the 2020 election among the GOP base. So he has lost a lot of support. He was a favorite, actually, to win the Senate race in 2022, or at least be the nominee for the Republicans. He probably would have been their best candidate against Mark Kelly. He has since declined, so he's no longer going to be running in the race, which certainly makes this a lot harder for Republicans to win that Senate seat. But on the gubernatorial level, Katie Hobbs, the incumbent Secretary of State, is running on the Democratic side. She's, of course, the biggest name. She's an incumbent. We don't really have much hypothetical polling, although a Data for Progress poll actually has Republicans up, which is interesting because usually a Democratic poll like that tends to have Democrats on top. So this might be a harder election for Democrats to win. But I think in a best case scenario, they would probably be able to win this by a tilt margin. I don't know if Katie Hobbs would be the nominee to do that, but certainly a certain nominee. It also depends who the Republicans win. I think when Republicans have good nominees in Arizona, it usually breaks for them. It is a historically red state. So I think ultimately Arizona probably will end up going to Democrats in this Dem best case scenario by a very small margin. Kansas is another interesting state. Kansas is a safe red state, presidentially speaking, but on the statewide level, they elected a Democratic governor by 5 points in 2018. Now, this is mostly because the stars really did align for Laura Kelly. She was coming off of the uh, failure, I guess, of the Sam Brownback administration. There were a lot of budget issues. Schools are running 4 days a week. Very unpopular governor by the end of his term. Uh, and Chris Kobach was the Republican nominee who was arguably, I guess, too conservative for the state of Kansas. Very Trumpian type Republican. Kansas certainly likes more of the established neoconservative type Republicans. So I certainly think in a best case scenario, Laura Kelly could win, but I think it would be by a very tiny margin. I think it would be a tilt margin. And the reason I say that, of course, is because Kansas is still Kansas. Kansas is a very red state. When she won in 2018, it was a Democratic wave year. Sam Brownback was a very bad incumbent governor, so his unpopularity certainly played a factor in this race. And Chris Kobach was a very bad nominee. 3 huge factors that resulted in a 5-point victory. I still think Laura Kelly might be able to hold on to her seat in a best case scenario. That's not my prediction, but I do think in a Dem best case, she'd probably be able to hold on very, very narrowly. Similar to Bell Edwards in 2019. He won re-election by only 2 points. He'd won his first election, I believe, by 10 or 11. So even though he was popular, the fact that Louisiana was a red state played a huge factor in his 2019 election. I think similarly, we're going to see a similar factor with Laura Kelly in Kansas. Moving on down to the state of Texas. Texas, I think, has the potential to be somewhat close. If we look at the 2020 election results, Donald Trump only won this state by 5.4%, 5.6%, a much smaller margin than the 9-point victory he enjoyed in 2016. The reason that this happened, though, was because Collin, Denton, these suburban Dallas counties, as well as the Houston and Austin area, got much bluer, particularly Dallas-Fort Worth and Austin. Houston kind of stayed more or less the same, although Montgomery County did shift to the left by around 7 points, which is significant. The border region of Texas saw huge shifts in favor of the Republicans in the 2020 election. If that was to keep up, certainly would play a role in the race, although we're looking at a best case scenario for Democrats. So in 2018, though, Greg Abbott is a formidable challenger for Democrats. He's able to raise millions of dollars. In 2018, he outperformed all the statewide Dems very significantly. Ted Cruz only beat Beto O'Rourke by 2.5%. We compare that to other statewide races. Lieutenant governor was within 5 points. Attorney general was within 3 points. Very close races statewide. Tarrant County barely going for Republicans. If Democrats are able to pull a good nominee this time around, they're not going to flip the state in 2022, but I think it could be brought down to a lean margin, whether it's Greg Abbott or whether it's Allen or someone else on the Republican side. I still think Texas would probably be a lean margin, probably around similar to the presidential margin, maybe around 7 points. But I certainly don't think this is going to be a flip in Texas, not in 2022. Minnesota, I think incumbent Governor Tim Walz would probably win his re-election by a likely, maybe even a safe margin. We'll put it as safe, actually. Because in 2018, he was able to win by around 11 points. Now, that was a Democratic wave year. Minnesota is a blue state, though, and Tim Walz is fairly popular. I don't know of any notable Republican challengers that are going to be particularly strong against him. Of course, we're talking about a best-case scenario. For Dems' best case, he probably wins by over 12. I don't think it's going to be 15 or 20 points or anything crazy like that, but I certainly think it could be around anywhere from 12 to 14 points. Iowa is interesting because Kim Reynolds, the incumbent governor, she won in a blue wave year by around 3 points, which is a testament to Iowa's politics, really, the fact that Iowa has moved a lot more to the right than it was in 2012. But Democrats might be able to see an opportunity in the state of Iowa if she still remains to be unpopular by that time. Also, political wins, if the Republican wave isn't really that much of a wave, we could certainly see a situation in which Iowa gets a lot closer. Of course, in the Republican primary, Kim Reynolds is trouncing. I think even in a best-case scenario, Republicans are still going to hold the state of Iowa, but I think it would be by a lean margin. I think it could be maybe like a 5-point margin or something. But I don't think this is realistically going to be a Republican pickup, even in a best case, because again, this is a midterm. Biden's the incumbent president. Democrats have a lower ceiling, I think, than Republicans do this time around. Wisconsin has a incumbent Democratic governor, Tony Evers. He beat Scott Walker by 1.1%, which was impressive given that Scott Walker was a formidable incumbent. He was able to raise a lot of money. Wasn't enough, though. In fact, a lot of people, despite the polling, a lot of people expected Scott Walker to win this race back in 2018. I was certainly surprised when it flipped. But it goes to show you that was the type of year it was. But Tony Evers might have trouble, but we're talking about a best-case scenario. So I think it would depend on his opponent and his popularity. But I think he would be able to probably, in a best case, win by a lean margin, probably 2 to 3 points or something. It's going to be close, but I still think he can pull it off. Michigan with Gretchen Whitmer, same thing. I think a lean margin. If we go back to 2018, she actually won by a much larger margin than Tony Evers. She won by nearly 10 points. And she did way better in the rural areas, which again is just a testament, I think, to the type of year we saw back in 2018. John James and Debbie Stabenow, that was closer than people expected too. But if we take a look at the governor race, though, she was able to narrow up the margins in a lot of safe red counties and make them likely or less safe than they usually are. But in a best case scenario, I think she holds on. Ohio, I think best case scenario for Democrats, I think Republicans would still hold it on, but it would be by a lean margin. Perhaps if the Republican nominee is Jim Renacci, who was the failed Senate candidate back in the 2018 elections. Jim Renacci, oh, we're looking at the wrong map. Jim Renacci lost to incumbent Senator Sherrod Brown by a significant margin, a likely margin. So I certainly think if he's the nominee, I don't think it will necessarily jeopardize the seat for Republicans, but I think it will bring it a lot closer. I think the energy factor is going to be on the GOP side. It is Ohio. I think Republicans would still hold on here, but it would be closer. We'll start up with the state of Maine and move down the East Coast. I think best case, Janet Mills, likely margin. Paula Page might be might be easy for her, it might be hard. It really depends on the year. But in a best case scenario for Democrats, I think they pick up the state of Maine. If we look back at the 2018 results, she was able to win against Sean Moody by 7 points. Paula Page was the former governor. He's now running to unseat Janet Mills or try to unseat Janet Mills. It will be an interesting race. I think it's not much to talk about, though. I think it's likely. Best case scenario for these New England states is their incumbents do not run, which would probably put them in Democratic hands. I think New Hampshire would probably go lean Democrat. In a best case scenario for the Democrats, Vermont would be safe, and I think Massachusetts would be safe with the non-incumbents running. Perhaps likely for Massachusetts if it is Charlie Baker's lieutenant governor running for election. Again, he's eligible for a third term, but if he decides not to run or he somehow loses his primary, which I don't think he will actually, Massachusetts Republicans are smarter than that. I think they know that Charlie Baker is the best they're going to get in a state as blue as Massachusetts, so I think a lot of people just end up settling for him, so I don't think he would lose a primary. But if he decides not to run, it possibly could be a Democratic pickup. Pennsylvania, there is no incumbent. Tom Wolf is a very popular governor in the state of PA. He won re-election by 17 points. He even won safe red county, Luzerne County. Luzerne is a newly safe red county, effectively, at least on the federal level, presidency and all that. But he was able to win this county considerably by around 4 points. Keep in mind, this was a county that Donald Trump in the 2020 election won by 13 points. So it really goes to show you how this state has really changed. This county has really changed. But I think in a best case scenario for Democrats, I think it would be a tilt margin. The reason I say that, there is no incumbent. It's going to be a tightly fought race. The Senate race is also going to have a lot of attention. Democrats can certainly pick it up, and I think they would in a best case, but I think it's going to be closer than Michigan and Wisconsin due to there being no incumbent. Maryland, I think, could be likely Democratic in a Democratic best case scenario. Boyd, what is his name? The incumbent lieutenant governor in Maryland. What is his name? Oh, Boyd Rutherford, Larry Hogan's lieutenant governor, is running for a promotion, or might be running for a promotion. It's all speculation. Although, oh, actually, he declined. I did not know that. He actually declined to run for re-election back in April, so I don't know why I'm talking about him. But he was at the head of the Republican pack. I think the fact that he's not running, the fact that Michael Steele, I don't think he's going to be a strong candidate. He might not even get through a Republican primary. He's a Lincoln Project guy. I think this is a likely, if not safe, Democratic seat at that point. I'll just put it as likely because the Republicans might be able to nominate a moderate type or somebody that Larry Hogan does campaign for. Larry Hogan is still popular in the state of Maryland. He still has a lot of political weight. But I think it will be a closer race, but I certainly think that it's probably going to go to the Democrats pretty considerably. Could be safe. I'm just going to leave it as likely for this situation as of right now. Moving on down to the state of South Carolina, I actually think this will be a likely Republican state in a best case scenario for Dems. The reason I say that is because if we go back to the 2018 elections in South Carolina, Henry McMaster only won by 8 points. He was actually an incumbent governor. He only won by 8 points. Nikki Haley, who had won in 2014, resigned to be, I think, the UN ambassador. I think that was her position in the Trump administration. But this could be somewhat competitive. Joe Cunningham is running for governor. I don't know what his statewide prospects are. I don't think there's any chance that Democrats pick up this governorship, but it could get into the likely range because South Carolina is one of those states that, though it's safe red, the margins are always kind of like around 10 points or so, nothing too dramatic. Georgia, I think for a best case, Stacey Abrams probably would be the nominee, and she'd probably win by a lean margin. Brian Kemp, unfortunately for him, has a very fractured GOP. He's not popular in the state to begin with. The GOP also is not really behind him due to the 2020 election fallout. He was already losing popularity with the COVID response. And in a state that is now essentially a purple state, I tend to even think it favors Democrats at this point with how dramatic the suburbs have shifted in the Atlanta area. I think he's in a lot of trouble. Georgia flipped for the first time since 1992 to the Democrats by a 0.2% margin. Raphael Warnock won by 2 points in the special election. John Ossoff 1.4. Certainly think in a best case scenario, it's not out of the realm of possibility at all for Democrats to pick up the state of Georgia. Finally, we move on down to the state of Florida. I think in a best case scenario, it's a lean margin for DeSantis. I think Charlie Crist is the best nominee that Democrats have in the state of Florida, or the best potential nominee. He's certainly leading the primary pact. He is running. Nikki Fried is probably the weakest. If we just look at the hypothetical polling, Charlie Crist is a lot more in striking distance than Nikki Fried is, even though Ron DeSantis is leading in every single poll. I still think he's going to win this race, but it'll probably be within a lean margin because, again, Florida has shifted, like Iowa and Ohio, to the right since the 2016 election. And I think ultimately that's going to favor the Republicans considerably, even in a situation where Democrats are favored. Anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. This is my 2022 Democrat best case scenario. Please leave a thumbs up if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification so you don't miss any more videos. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.